Welcome to the Tomorrow Today podcast, Mapping the Future of Business. My name is Buhle Dlamini. I am your host in this podcast. I am the member of Tomorrow Today, a speaker and focusing on the future of business, the future of people, as well as creating inclusive cultures in our organizations. In this episode, I'm excited to talk to you about managing your organizational culture for success. You've heard the quote, and this is a quote that's often attributed to a lot of different people, but I think it's most attributed to Peter Drucker. And the quote is, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." I'm laughing because I almost said culture eats breakfast for breakfast, which would not be a great quote at all. But culture eats strategy for breakfast. And you hear this so many times and we hear it over and over again. It becomes part of the mantra of doing business. But what does it really mean that culture eats strategy for breakfast? Really, does it mean that strategy is not important, that doing strategic plans and actually thinking about the future of your business is not important? Of course it doesn't. But what it does mean is that our strategic plans, no matter how good they are solely dependent on the culture that the organization has. You can have the best strategic plans, but if your culture is not helping you to achieve that strategy, of course, you are not going to go very far. And so when we think about culture, there's a lot of things that people often think about. We hear about, of course, the traditional explanations of what culture is. But the truth of the matter is that culture is the backbone of engagement. It's a backbone of innovation, long-term success in our organizations. So what is then culture? What are we talking about? I think a lot of people, when they hear organizational culture, because of what's been happening in business lately, it's actually not new. It's been happening over the last 15 years. Whenever you hear the word culture, people start thinking about all the perks that the company is going to give you. We start thinking about gym at the office. We think about childcare. We think about beanbags. All of those good things that the big tech companies are doing in Silicon Valley, and we think that everybody has got to do it. Yes, that could be part of culture, but that is missing the whole point of what we mean by organizational culture. So let's unpack it. I think the way that you need to think of culture is to think of it as, now I'm going to the traditional explanation again, but it is about shared values. It is about the beliefs. It is about the behaviors that define the way that an organization operates and the way that we do things around here. That is what culture is really about. But if you want a really quick check on your culture of your organization, maybe to feel the pulse of what your organization is really about, ask your employees. And I'm not talking about doing a survey monkey and sending an anonymous request to people and all of that, although you should do that too. I'm really talking about, imagine if you did this exercise, if you got on your phone on a Sunday evening as your employees are preparing to get back to work, and you ask them, what are they feeling as they think about going back to work tomorrow? The answer that you get is everything you need to know about what your culture of the organization is. And the truth of the matter is, if we were to do this exercise, I'm not sure how many leaders would be willing to hear the answers that will come from their employees. But if we really want to be successful going forward in our organizations, we've got to do this. We've got to think about culture. We've got to think about the culture that we're creating in our organizations, and how that culture is impacting not only our employees, but it's impacting the innovation in the organization, the productivity, and the way that people deliver on their jobs every single day. So when it comes to red flags that your culture might be in trouble, I think one of the biggest ones is often your turnover. If you're having high turnover in your organization, that means that you're actually spending more money at trying to attract, retain talent, and finding out that 6 months to a year that you're already losing those people. Hey, there's a sign that maybe you are in trouble there. And so high turnover is often one of the dead giveaways that you need to pay attention to your culture. Another one that you can think about is really about whether people are resistant to innovation or to changes that you want to bring in your organization. So think about it. You spend all the money trying to work on strategies that will improve your business. But when you present those strategies to your team and to your people, and people are just resistant and just not wanting to really bring about the change that you're hoping for. And so that already is telling you that, hey, something needs you to pay attention to what's going on here. We also often find that just a general disconnect between what we say and what people actually do. So, your shared values, the things that you say, these are our values, this is what we believe in, and what people actually do, which is your behavior. That already is telling you that something is wrong with the culture. And the last one to think about when it comes to this is really about, what do your customers say? Your customers, look at those Yelp reviews that your customers are telling you. That is a telltale sign when they are not satisfied. So customer satisfaction dipping or declining is a dead giveaway that your culture is in trouble. And so you might be already feeling this in your organization. This might be something that you're already thinking about and saying, something is wrong with our culture. And you're asking yourself, okay, what is it? How do I solve it? Before you delve into trying to solve it, maybe try and figure out what might be the actual problem behind your culture, your culture and your organization. A great podcast by Adam Grant speaks about this. It's called The 4 Deadly Sins of Organizational Culture. And it really explores what is usually behind toxic cultures and cultures that are just not good cultures. So let's talk about some of the biggest culture killers that are out there. Rooted in these 4 deadly sins is actually a tension. There's a tension between two sides of the coins, as it were. And so this is, on one end, you've got results versus relationships. And on the other end, you've got rules versus risks. And if you ignore one side, you will fail in all of these 4 cultural traps. And so what are these 4 cultural traps that we often see? And I think for me, it's something that we see a lot sometimes when we engage with organizations, because when you are in the organization, sometimes you are not able to see the challenges that are going on because you are in the frame, and sometimes it takes someone who is on the outside to actually look in and see. The first deadly sin that we often see is toxicity. When you have such a toxic culture and that people just hate going to work. I used to laugh at something that someone used to say when talking about a sign that you have a toxic culture. And they were talking about when you're going to work and you get a heart attack because your heart attacks you for trying to go to that place. That is a dead giveaway that you have a toxic culture. That's when we focus on results at the expense of relationships. And you know what I'm talking about. This is where, we are pursuing results at all costs. Relationships be damned. And so we prioritize, success, we prioritize results, we prioritize winning without focusing on relationships. And so what actually ends up happening in those organizations is that we tolerate bad behavior, and sometimes we even celebrate or reward that bad behavior. Think about it. Think about organizations where people can do the worst possible thing and still get promoted and still move forward. That is already a dead giveaway that something is wrong in that organization. Toxic cultures are a number one driver of turnover and number one driver of what we see in organizations where people are having workplace depression and so on and so forth. Because in toxic cultures, bullies are allowed to just run rampant as long as they're producing results, as long as they're delivering. And I think that in today's world where profits sometimes trump everything, this is what often leads to that first deadly sin of toxic culture. So I would say to you as a leader, think about it, ask yourself, what is our culture like really? Are we allowing a toxic behavior? Are we allowing a toxic environment to reign unchecked and unchallenged? And are we letting people just go ahead and continue to be promoted even when they're really destructive to the rest of the team members? Toxicity, number one deadly sin. The second one is mediocrity. This is where relationships are now elevated above results. So it's the opposite of toxicity. Everyone is getting along, everyone is happy, and we're so happy to be in this environment and work with one another. Everybody loves everybody, but nobody takes accountability, and nobody takes accountability for results. This is where we let things slide because we're trying to protect the relationship instead of also focusing on results. And so everyone gets along, but accountability is missing. And what tends to happen in these cultures is that the quality of work suffers, and we see over and over again that continued slide towards mediocrity, and so mediocrity reigns. The third sin, third deadly sin of deadly cultures is bureaucracy. And depending on how old the organization is or how traditional the organization is, you might know what I'm talking about. Bureaucracy, this is where rules are highly valued and risk is avoided at all costs. And so the focus is all about focusing on the rules. Follow the rules, and we don't take risk. We don't try anything new. And as a result, what tends to happen is that red tape reigns supreme. You need permission to do this. You need an acquisition form for that. You need this, you need that before you can do anything. At the end of the day, people just give up trying new things, and people just go along with the flow. And that's not good for your culture either. And then the last sin of deadly cultures is anarchy. This is where everybody is allowed to take risks, and we don't care about the rules at all. And so chaos just reigns, everybody's doing whatever they want. There's no structure, there's no alignment, and it's every person for themselves. So an example that I've encountered a lot of times when it comes to toxic cultures is often around, superstars, organizations that value superstars over relationships. You know what I'm talking about. I've seen this over and over again in organizations where you have these individuals just because they bring in most of the business and they bring in the success for the organization. But the way that they talk to team members and the way that they talk to other people in the organizations on a day-to-day basis, belittling people, and just being absolutely awful in meetings, awful in the way that they interact with their colleagues. But because they bring in the business, hey, nobody says anything. If you try to escalate it to management, managers say, well, that's who he is. You know how Joe is like. And I've seen this more times than I'll care to accept or to admit. And when that happens, what happens is that you then start to lose the people in the organization. They might not be superstars, but they are playing a vital role in the organization. And when you start losing those people who are the foundation of the work that you do every single day, then it doesn't matter what your superstars do, because the morale of the organization and the long-term success of the organization starts to crumble and starts to get affected. And so this is really one of the things that we see. And I think a great example of how one leader dealt with that was actually when reports were brought to the CEO about this superstar continuously, being toxic, continuously berating and belittling other people in the organization. A CFO came to the CEO and said, "Hey, we have a problem. Our guy that's bringing us the most business is also costing us a lot of money in attrition, in complaints, and in all of that." This leader was a good leader because in response, he just said, "Hey, let's fire him. Let's get rid of the guy." I mean, yes, the board was, they went crazy. They're like, "How can you fire him? He brought in so much business last year." And the answer was, if we care about long-term success, we are going to make sure that we deal with this toxicity right at its root before it actually kills our business. And I think that's what we're talking about here. So it's about really thinking about what are the deadly sins that are creeping into your organization. Is it toxicity? Is it mediocrity? Is it bureaucracy? Or is it anarchy? Because any one of those can actually cripple the success of your organization. So then comes the next question. What makes a culture a winning culture? How do you build a winning culture? And I think often we want to complicate things. We want to make it so complicated that we want to implement a 15-step strategy to build a winning culture. And I have to say, that is just not how you do it. I think that the more simpler we look at how to build a winning culture, the more we will be able to achieve it for our organizations. And it really comes down to three things. It comes down to three things. And I know what you're going to say when I say these three things. That sounds way too simple. Well, keep it simple, stupid, right? I mean, let's think about it. It's the three things that define whether a culture is winning. And the first thing is people. The second thing is mission. And the last one is values and leadership. And I tie those two, and I'll explain why I've tied them together. Well, let's talk about people. Yes, we've heard, if you've worked in an organization long enough, you would have heard this phrase, said by CEOs and by team leaders that the most important asset in this organization is people. And if your people roll their eyes when you say that, that's a telltale sign that you're actually not getting it. I think we've paid so much lip service to this people aspect of culture that most of our organizations and most of our people just don't believe it anymore. So what are we talking about when we say the most important aspect of culture is people? We're talking about the fact that if you want a winning culture, if you want a successful organizational culture, you need to create a culture where people feel seen, where people feel heard, and where people are excited to work together. I mean, it doesn't get simpler than that. People feel seen, people feel heard, and they're excited to work together. So, I mean, there are many ways that you can achieve this. And I've seen this again in organizations, that when people are excited to work at an organization, it's because they feel that their team leader or their manager listens to them, listens to their ideas, listens to what they bring to the table, and that they're seen. One of the most powerful phrases a team leader can say to a team member is, "I see you." But it's not just the words. It's actually you living out, "I see you," every day, in the way that you engage with them, in the way that you take notice when they do things right, not only when they do things wrong. It's when you actually go above and beyond to actually connect with the individuals in the organization. Now, I know you might be leading a 10,000 person organization and you might be leading a 10 people organization. Regardless of where you sit in the organization as a leader, you can actually exemplify this. I loved what the former CEO of PepsiCo did, and this has gone around the world because what she actually did, she wrote letters to the parents of her subordinates. Now, when you're a group CEO of PepsiCo Global, that means that your subordinates are regional CEOs, are country CEOs, and so on. So these people are on their own right. They're already important people, but there were her subordinates. There were people that reported to her. And she wrote letters, personalized letters, and there was over 400 of them, by the way. And she wrote personalized letters to their parents, thanking them for their son or for their daughter, and what a great asset they were to PepsiCo. Oh, I mean, you hear of these stories, and I get goosebumps because I think that if you're running a team of 50 people and you don't know some of their names, and you have a CEO who has 400 people reporting to her, and again, and tens and hundreds of thousands under that, but she knows the 400 that report to her enough to be able to write a personal letter for each and every one of them. The impact of that exercise alone was exponential for PepsiCo. The excitement that those managers and supervisors gained from that experience, it just boosted the organization to such an extent that it was just incredible. So first, people. So you can always do something to make sure that people feel seen, people feel heard, and that people are excited to work together in an organization. Now, we can spend a whole episode just talking about that, but maybe we'll leave that for another one in the future. The second one is mission. And so I'm not just talking about mission statement and all of that stuff. Yeah. All of that is important. The more clearer you are with that, the better. But it's about having the clarity of purpose. It's about helping your team understand why their work matters and who is it that their work serves. I think that for many of us, if we feel like our job is not making an impact, it impacts the way that we contribute and the way that we do it. And as a great example about this, from the call center, where where you had these students working at a call center, trying to raise funds for students at a university. And one of the students put it this way: they had a poster behind their work desk that said, "Doing a good job here is like wetting your pants in a dark suit. You get a warm feeling, but nobody notices." Ouch! And that tells you the whole story, that they did not feel that their work mattered. And so one of the leaders, when they noticed that this was what was going on, they then got these call center workers in touch with the students that they were actually helping. They brought some of the students in during the summer and let them tell their stories to them about the impact that the work of the call center was having on their lives. And the next quarter, the motivation in the organization and all of that went off the charts. People were excited to do their work because, hey, they knew the impact that they were making. And so no matter what you do, whether you are saving lives or you are just delivering milk, and making sure that people get milk in their fridges in their homes, can your people get excited about their mission? And are you telling the stories that will actually help them? And then the last one is values and leadership. And I tie these together because I really believe that we often hear a lot about values, but actually, if we want to see values in action, leaders have got to lead the way. Leaders have to model and uphold organizational values And without leaders showing the way, yeah, we might as well just forget it. Because leadership is not just about a position, it's about influence, it's about accountability, it's about really showing the way. And so the challenge for most of us as leaders, leading our organizations and thinking about culture of organizations, is to say, okay, what are we doing to lead by example? So I'm hoping that that gives you a lot of food for thought already, just as you think about managing an organizational culture. And as a new year starts, you can really make a huge impact for going forward in your organization. But I'll be remiss if I only talk about these things from just that point of view and not talk about how do we adapt our cultures for the future of work. Because here on the Tomorrow Today podcast, Mapping the Future of Business, it's what we are about. It's about helping you to think about the future, helping you to think about how your organization is well positioned to succeed in a changing world. And here's one thing that you need to remember is that future demands adaptability. And so there are some things that we still need to think about if we're going to succeed in the future of our organizations. Already, as I sit here in January of 2025, most of the organizations have already come out. Some of the big ones have already said, everyone is going back to the office. We're ditching this hybrid work, we're ditching this remote work and all of that stuff, and we're going back to the office. And it's okay. We knew that was going to happen, that was going to come, and it's here. But I will say that really successful organizations going forward are the ones that are going to take the best of what we learned from a hybrid work. The future of work is always going to be hybrid. Whether people are at the office, from 8 to 5 or not, that doesn't matter anymore. We have already learned that to succeed, we have to be hybrid. And so by hybrid, I just don't mean the physical space that we're in. I'm talking about flexibility, I'm talking about autonomy, and I'm talking about understanding that your work is not defined by where you are. Those are the principles that we have to continue to hold on going forward into the future. And it's going to be important for the culture of your organization. And so continue to embrace hybrid, continue to embrace the use of technology in the organization, and to unite teams around common goals and around those shared goals. And the way that we use technology can either boost our culture, or it can actually then again go back to those 4 deadly sins. Right now, there's lots of questions and lots of discussions about what technologies should we employ. What about artificial intelligence? Should we use it or should we not? And some organizations are putting red tape around it, and they're missing the opportunity because they're not willing to take the risk that they need to do. And then I would just say that, hey, when we think about culture, just remember that culture is not just an HR buzzword. It is a strategy for success. It is something that we need to think about if we're going to be successful going forward. And so as a leader, I'm calling you to stop and reflect. Think about the culture of your organization. Ask yourself, are we living out the culture that we can be proud of, the culture that we want for our organization, or do we need to change? And if we need to change, go back then to the podcast, listen to some of the things that I've highlighted about what are the deadly sins of culture, and then also about what are the 3 things that we need to focus on if we're going to build a successful organizational culture. So if you want some cultural transformation, we'd love to help you. This is what we do at Tomorrow Today with our team. We work with organizations not only just about the future of business, but we also help you come up with a strategy. We have a Tomorrow Today consulting team. And so reach out to us, connect with us, and see if we can help you. But keep the conversation going. And I think the more your leadership talks about culture and the kind of culture that you want, the more you will be able to achieve it. For our guest interview, Graeme Codrington interviewed Mirjam Baijens, the Chief HR Officer of Grundfos Global. And they spoke about fractional talent and workers not being tied to one organization or one company. And this really emphasizes a new model that emphasizes flexibility, talent management, and the importance of knowledge sharing as the world changes and the way that we work changes going forward. And so this interview on flexibility in the workplace, the whole new paradigm of working is really, really an exciting addition to what we're talking about today when we're thinking about organizational culture. So take a listen and see how this can impact your work.
Mirjam, thank you very much for joining us. If you think about the organization of the 2030s, what's your one big idea to make sure that we are ready for that?
So if I think, out of the box, wishful thinking, not being constrained by any any of the current thinking, what if we would have organizations where people are no longer on the payroll of your company and the belonging to one organization is gone? So in other words, we will have networks of experts, specialists, generalists, resources, maybe even tools or systems that can be leveraged whenever you need them. And you pull people in and out for roles and projects. And they can do the same for multiple organizations and no longer have a competitive barrier. Because then you really look at how you can leverage the talent and the capabilities that people have without, again, being hindered by specific roles and responsibilities, and as a result, focusing on the talent shortage, as we do mostly at the moment.
Fascinating idea. It does strike me that there is one industry that's already been doing this for maybe 100 years, and that's Hollywood. Because this is how movies are made, right? That
Exactly.
You gather a group of people for a period of time to get a job done, and then everybody disperses, and maybe some of those people like working together and they work together again on a new project in the future. But it's not the craziest idea because we see a very successful industry already doing it. But you're not a Hollywood executive. I mean, you work in quite a traditional environment. Tell me quickly about your job and the interesting requirements of a global company that's family run out of Denmark. It's quite an interesting setup, isn't it?
It is. So yes, I'm the head of HR at Grundfos globally, and we are represented in more than 60 countries. We are a global company, 20,000 people. Next year we'll be celebrating our 80 years, so it's been around for a while. But as a result, you also have, like in many other companies, of course, more traditional operating models and ways of organizing your workforce. We also have a big proportion of blue-collar workers, white-collar workers, we have factories around the globe. So it is, in that sense, more structured like other manufacturing organizations, and certainly not like Hollywood.
No. So here then I'm really interested in your idea because you are not in a super advanced technology environment where everybody can just sort of come and go as they want. You're in quite a traditional industry, in quite a traditional setup with a family-owned business that's gone global, and probably quite traditional professions with engineers mainly in manufacturing. So there's all sorts of things that would say, why would such a crazy idea come to somebody like you? But why would you see this ability to have more flexibility about where people work? Why would that? Let's start maybe with the company side, because I think there would also be a conversation about why would it be useful for the individual. But why would you see it as a chief HR officer? Why would you see this as a valuable thing to do?
Yeah, for the company, it is like what we've heard already since COVID, the war for talent and people, the great resignation, and people want to work more in line with other aspects of their life. And we also see that simply attracting the best people for the right jobs around the globe is becoming more and more challenging. And I hear that also from peers of mine in different industries, so it's not unique to Grundfos. And I believe if we would, on the other hand, sometimes may be a bit more daring or bold, that someone who on paper does not necessarily have the traditional profile for a certain job, but that as a company, we are willing to take a bet, take a calculated risk and say, well, this person could actually do this job, even though on paper they don't have a lot of the relevant experience. And the same applies when you then look at all the talent gaps, so to speak. If you could pull in people in multiple ways, or people who do not even want to work part-time, let alone full-time, but you could still benefit from their experience and skills, you could also help the companies scale up and down in times when there's a high need for something, or when there's a busy period. We already see that with our blue-collar workers. We need some more flexibility to scale up and down depending on production and depending on sales. But you could do the same with white-collar workers. And I think we're sometimes too hung up on the fact that someone needs to be on our payroll, needs to be part of our system, as opposed to thinking networks of organizations that could connect.
I suppose in some industries you've got the concept of labor brokers, and those are often seen as being used more for lower skilled people, because they then become reasonably, again, we'll talk about the individuals in a second, but it's almost as if they sort of are replaceable parts. But you're thinking about doing a similar thing for like quite involved skills, for more senior level people. So it's not just sort of the Uber delivery for the lower level, but it's actually for high level skills. I think that's quite an interesting idea for companies to think about. But it's a mindset shift, because suddenly now you don't own these people. We wouldn't say we own people, but we kind of do own them, don't we? We lock them into full-time contracts. You can only work for us. And you're saying we must get away from that.
Yeah, and of course you already have the concept today where, people are freelancers, they have their own company, they work on a consulting basis, but that's not what I mean. I mean that you could really be doing a job of, let's say, you're a learning specialist. Now, that is more of a generic role. You can do that for Grundfos, but you can also do that for Lego. You can also do that for another big organization. And it's not that you are on 3 different payrolls. Yes, you can argue, but Mirjam, then you're talking about the freelance concept, and then everyone should become a freelancer and we go full-time in the gig economy, so to speak. Yes and no, because you could also allow people to be on multiple payrolls if that's what they want to do, but you do not necessarily own them fully for your company, but they in turn can grab knowledge and experience from the other networks that they are part of, and then they can pull that in the organization. So it's much more of a free flow model where you tap into these, talent networks, even though I say everyone has a talent. So this doesn't mean an exclusive group of people who are considered high potentials or something. But you tap into networks of experienced people who are not just coming in on an interim basis. They can still have a long-standing relationship with the organization. But the model is completely different.
No,
and it might be very, very sort of theoretical visual thinking, but I think we can do a better job by leveraging those capabilities across.
Yeah. So it's at the moment, we've only sort of got 2 options in our mind for models: full-time employment or freelancer. And you're suggesting there's some space somewhere in the middle that's not either of those 2 things, but so it's more of a commitment to being involved with you, but not 100%. Obviously, you wouldn't want them to be with a competitor or something, so there would be some limits on it. Obviously, that's easy to work around. But what then, so we get the concept, what do you think would be the benefits for the business? I've heard you say 3 things so far. The one would be that you could maybe get people that at the moment you can't get. So there's a specialist skill and a talent that maybe you need, but you don't need them full time. And at the moment, you then just can't get them. So that changes your mindset, unlocks that. Second benefit would be that people could bring knowledge from other parts, but not just bring it and then they sit with you. They bring that knowledge every day, every week, because they're getting new insights from a different industry. Maybe you actively encourage the second or third employment to be very different, to be different industry, different energy, and then you're bringing that learning. And the third one would be, I think it's probably better, not just for younger people who I think are asking for it, but I actually suspect, Mirjam, that the coming up to retirement people might be interested in this too, because they're about to turn 60 whatever, 62, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is in your country, but they're not anywhere near finished working or finished contributing. So why should they go from 100% employment to retirement 100%? Why couldn't there be a space somewhere in between? So am I correct? But then also, what other benefits do you see?
Absolutely, and particularly, in Western Europe, we know that we're facing an aging workforce.
Of course, it's even more for you there.
Same in North America. And to your point, people, first of all, retire later, but also would like to maybe not even retire and want to continue doing something meaningful, not on a full-time basis, but being connected with a company. I mean, you already see examples. I've seen that in my previous companies where you do, reverse mentoring, where they onboard younger people, or the other way around, where younger people mentor people that are close to retirement, or where they do phase-out models. That is nothing new. But at the same time, you could keep people more engaged if they can work, to your point, in a completely different industry for 2 days, and then for 1 day in something that has nothing to do with manufacturing, or is in the other spectrum of services, or what have you. So you can also create then that motivation for the individual instead of continuing to do what they've been doing already for many, many years.
That makes sense. Yeah. So now you've shifted already, Mirjam, to my next question. So let's keep going, because I did want to have a look at this through the eyes of the individual. Why would I, as a talented person in the system, want this? Because does this make my life safer, easier, better? You've given one answer, which is it takes away any boredom, if there is boredom, and I think it would genuinely help with engagement, that you can flex your mind in different environments. And I honestly, most of the talented people I know would like that. Some of them like the structure. They like to just do what they do over and over. But I think most would appreciate that. So that's one benefit I can see. Any other benefits that you could see from the individual's perspective?
Well, for sure. I mean, what we already know is, having the flexibility, first of all, to work from anywhere and not having to go into an office. I mean, this has been a debate since COVID, and you see some organizations that go radically back to 100% in the office. And then there are some backlashes because particularly younger employees, but also, a lot of employees who have families, who have younger children, they want to keep that flexibility. And in that sense, it provides something that we all know and we all talk about, but this could be another way to enhance that flexibility, because you can determine where you work, for whom you work, and how much you work. And then there's a whole scale between the full-time and the part-time, and there's a lot in the middle. So that flexibility, I think, is important, but also the fact that we know that nowadays people do not join a company anymore for life. They want to have different experiences. They will not stay with a company for 30, 40 years like, the previous generations have done. So it also enables you to actually keep those people maybe longer, because they have different experience in different types of organizations, and not just with one organization. And I think the third element, which you also put in your summary, because the individual employees are exposed to more knowledge, more experience in different environments, they can bring ideas, benchmarks, external views much faster, as opposed to what you see very often, like, well, we need to test an idea, we pull in a consultancy. And nothing against consultants, because you need those as well, but at the same time, you give richer experience to employees, allowing them to gain that without having to hop companies and a lot of complex steps of changing your contract here and moving there and maybe going to another country. You create a much more fluid model. So those are a few things, at least, that I can think of.
No, I think that's a great list. I'd add one more, and I know why you're not thinking about this, and that is actually security of income. And you're not thinking about it because Grundfos provides plenty of security for their employees, but there's no guarantees, right? And if you speak to any financial advisor, the first advice they will always give you is diversify your portfolio. But we never do that with our actual income. We only do that with our savings. But why shouldn't we do it with our income? Diversify your income as well as your investments, and you're safer than you've ever been before. So I think there is that argument as well from the individual perspective.
Yeah, and another option could also be that people are not necessarily working for multiple organizations, but they work in a network of specialists. And let's say Grundfos would pull in that company, not as a shared service center, not as a consultant, but simply as a workforce that can come in and out depending on when you need them. Now you can argue, well, but that's the interim model or that's the freelance model. Not necessarily, because they would still be employed by an organization, but they would work on a demand basis. And then they would not be pulled in and out on assignments because they still continue working for the same company. Now, is that the same as offshoring or outsourcing? You could argue yes, but at the same time, I would see it slightly differently. I don't know what you think about that.
No, you make a very compelling point here. And as you said, I asked you if there was a big idea and don't have any constraints on your idea. So just, in fact, in case if anybody from Grundfos is actually watching this video or listening to the audio, we're not making promises here. Just relax. Okay, Mirjam's not putting a proposal together for the future of Grundfos. This is a conversation between two people who enjoy thinking about the future of work. But I do think that maybe the picture you're painting is almost feels too much, like too big of an idea. It's too far. But here's why I've enjoyed the last few minutes of, because my mind's spinning now, Mirjam, for sure, is that I think that if you put that out as a big idea, and you know that I love doing that, you put a big idea in front of people, we sometimes even call them ridiculous ideas. The ridiculous idea itself might not be the correct idea, but what you then do is you start to release some of your constraints. So I'm now thinking, what happens if a company, it might not go the full idea that you've had, but they might say, why can't we give some of our talented people, maybe those people heading closer to retirement, who we don't often call talented, but of course they are very talented, why don't we give them the opportunity for flexibility? And we say to them, if you'd like to only work 3 days a week, we'll pay you for 3 days a week and we will release you. And then they might choose to semi-retire and still work for us, but only 3 days a week, and then the salary reflects that. Or they might say, wonderful, I'll do 1 day of volunteering and 1 day of working somewhere else. So that now becomes something you could easily do. I think it would make a huge difference to many companies who've got an aging workforce. And so the big idea unlocks a practical idea that makes a difference. So hopefully that's what people hear. They don't just say, well, we'll never do that. That sounds crazy. Let's not think about it. But they take your idea and see where it goes in their business and their industry. So that's how I'd respond. I think it's a great idea myself.
Yeah, and like I said, probably some people will be thinking, yeah, but in some shape or form that's already happening or we're doing that. Yes, and I would say pull those pieces together and take it yet to another level. To your point, is that realistic right now? For many organizations, no, it's not. And again, I will not do anything radical in Grundfos tomorrow. Um, but it's good to sort of think about it, because we know that it already in certain economies and countries, but it's getting even worse over the next couple of years. There will be a major shortage of talent in specific areas, whether it's digital, whether it's even in specific technical roles. There will simply not be enough people who can do the work. So you need to think differently. And then, of course, people say, well, but we have AI and everything can be taken over by bots and you name it. Yes, some work will be done like that. And for sure, we are only seeing the tip of the iceberg of what you can do with AI. But at the same time, the human interaction is not something that you can eliminate. Everyone thought that also when the computers came for the first time on the market, and when the whole digitization started. So what do you do to address that? Because you can keep on looking for software engineers, but at one point you can't find them anymore. At least not in the traditional model, to just give one specific example. So what are different ways of working or models of working that you can still have those capabilities and not be constrained as an organization? And that's more where I'm coming from when I'm saying, okay, I might be thinking of different models, because it's going to be around the corner, these type of constraints.
Absolutely. Mirjam, as I believe the young people might say, and now I'm going to show that I'm not a young person, you understood the assignment perfectly. For me, that's exactly what this series of interviews is about. And I knew when I was going to speak to you that you'd bring something interesting from, obviously, your perspective of people being the most important asset, but us needing to do something different. I don't think that the 2030s is going to just be about improving what we already do. It feels to me, I think you're spot on, we've got to start doing different things. The problems of talent shortages, employee engagement, flexibility, life purpose, aging workforces, none of those problems are going to be solved with just improving our existing system. And so whether this idea or any other ideas feel too big at the moment, I think by 2030 we might find that they were actually too small, because I think the world of work is going to change a lot. So with that being my final word, let me leave the final word to you, and thank you.
No, thank you, Graeme. It's always good to think a little bit out of the box, and you are very good at, coming with sort of more provocative ideas, and it also helps me to then think, what would I do? So thanks a lot for the invitation. Really enjoyed our conversation, and of course, happy to stay in touch with all the work we've already done together. But thank you again for inviting me for this series. Really appreciate it.
Perfect. And I am going to cheat and say one other little thing. When you do make all these big changes at Grundfos, please come back to the podcast and tell us how it went. Okay. But that's no promises to anyone in the team. Thanks again, Mirjam. Thank you.
Thank you, Graeme.
So thanks for listening to another episode of the Tomorrow Today podcast. If you're a leader, manager, or just someone who is interested in how the workplace is evolving, I hope these insights have really sparked some ideas for you and new ideas for your team and for your business. Please go ahead and check the show notes to recap on what was covered in this episode. We also share some resources that you can click on and that you can follow, as well as follow us on social media, wherever you're connecting to us. So again, follow us on LinkedIn and other platforms. And remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to us right now. Don't leave that platform until you click that follow button so that you stay in touch. See you in the next episode of the Tomorrow Today podcast, Mapping the Future of Business.